Sign every line or I swear to God I will make sure you never see those grandchildren again. Your brother needs this more than you do. You owe this family." My aunt did not raise her voice when she said that. She never did. That was the thing about her. She delivered threats the way other people delivered weather forecasts. Flat. Certain. Like the outcome had already been decided and she was just informing you of the schedule. I was 31 years old, sitting at my late father's kitchen table, 8 months pregnant, with a certified copy of his will in my hand that I was almost certain was not the will he had actually written. Before I tell you what I did when my own family tried to erase me from my father's estate while I was carrying his first grandchild, drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I want to know how far this reaches. I need to back up, because none of this makes sense without understanding who my father was and what he built. My father spent 34 years as a machinist in Akron, Ohio. He worked the kind of job that leaves its mark on your hands permanently. The knuckles cracked, the fingernails always faintly stained no matter how hard he scrubbed. He was not a man who talked about money. He was a man who quietly saved it. When I was in college, I found out almost by accident that he had been putting $500 a month into a separate account since before I was born. Not for himself. For us. For me and my brother Marcus. He called it the rainy day fund. But by the time he passed from a stroke 2 days after Thanksgiving, it had grown into something considerably larger than that. The house in Akron, fully paid off. A savings account with a little over $240,000 in it. A small rental property in Canton he had bought in the 90s that he never once mentioned at the dinner table. And a life insurance policy that named me as co-beneficiary alongside Marcus. Marcus is 4 years older than me. We were close when we were kids, but somewhere in our 20s, something shifted. He married a woman named Brooke, and Brooke had opinions about everything. About how our father should spend his retirement, about which grandchildren he should prioritize, about how family money should flow. Marcus never pushed back on her. Not once, not in 12 years. When I got pregnant with my daughter, my father was the first person I told after my husband Theo. He cried on the phone. Actually cried. He said, "I've been waiting my whole life for this, sweetheart." He was so excited that he drove up to visit us in Pittsburgh the following weekend, just to take us out to dinner and sit across from my belly and beam. He died 6 weeks later. I could not fly to Akron for the arrangements because my OB had grounded me due to elevated blood pressure. Theo drove down alone to help Marcus and my aunt, my father's older sister, handle the immediate decisions. I stayed home and felt completely useless and kept a photo of my dad on the nightstand and talked to my belly about what he was like when I was small. The will reading was scheduled for 3 weeks after the funeral. My aunt called me the evening before, not to check on me, not to ask about the baby. She called to prepare me, she said, for what she called some updates to your father's wishes. I did not sleep that night. The attorney's office was in downtown Akron, on the 4th floor of a building that smelled like carpet cleaner and coffee that had been sitting too long. Theo drove us down that morning. I was so pregnant that putting on my coat felt like a small athletic event, and by the time we found parking and walked to the elevator, I had to stop twice to breathe through the pressure in my lower back. Marcus was already in the waiting room when we arrived. Brooke was next to him, wearing an expression I had seen her wear before, the particular look of someone who is trying very hard to appear like they are not pleased with themselves. My aunt was there too, seated in the corner with her handbag in her lap and her ankles crossed. She had dressed for the occasion. Silk blouse, pearl earrings. She looked like she was attending a luncheon. Nobody hugged me. Marcus glanced up, nodded, and went back to looking at his phone. The attorney, a man named Mr. Parrish, had been my father's estate lawyer for over a decade. He was precise and unhurried in the way of people who have done something so many times it no longer carries any emotional weight for them. He set a folder on the conference table and opened it and began to read. The house, split equally between Marcus and me. Fine. Expected. The savings account, 80% to Marcus, 20% to me. I looked up from the paper. That was not what my father had told me. 6 weeks before he died, during that dinner in Pittsburgh, he had talked about the accounts. He had said specifically that he wanted things split down the middle. He said he had updated everything after my mother passed. He said he wanted to make sure both of his kids were taken care of equally. The rental property to Marcus outright with the stipulation that he maintain it for 5 years before selling. The life insurance, Marcus as primary beneficiary, me removed entirely. I felt something go cold in my chest. Mr. Parrish finished reading and folded his hands on the folder and looked around the table with the expression of a man who has delivered difficult news before and knows when to be quiet. Theo's hand found my leg under the table. "When was this version of the will dated?" I asked. My voice came out steadier than I expected. "October 14th, Mr. Parrish said. "My father had visited us in Pittsburgh on October 3rd. He had taken us to that dinner. He had cried about the baby. He had told me he was so glad we had each other. And 11 days later, according to this document, he had quietly rewritten his estate to funnel the majority of everything he had built to Marcus. 11 days. I asked to see the original document. Mr. Parrish said this was the original document on file. I asked who had prepared it. He said the amendment had been brought to him by my father directly, along with 2 witnesses. He showed me the signature page. I looked at my father's signature. I had seen that signature my entire life, on birthday cards, on permission slips, on the check he wrote me when I graduated from nursing school. It was familiar enough that I could close my eyes and draw it from memory. This one was close. But the capital R in Robert sat slightly differently. The loop at the bottom of the T in Garrett was too tight. Small things. The kind of things you would never notice if you had not grown up watching that signature appear on every piece of paper that ever mattered in your life. I said nothing in that room. I thanked Mr. Tier. Parrish shook his hand and walked out with Theo. In the car, I sat with my hands on my stomach and looked at the parking garage ceiling and breathed. Theo said, "Tell me what you're thinking." "I'm thinking," I said slowly, "that my father did not write that will. I am a registered nurse. I have worked labor and delivery for 6 years. In my job, panic is something you recognize and set aside because the work does not wait for your feelings. I have delivered babies in elevators. I have kept my voice calm while my hands were doing something that required my entire brain. I know how to think clearly when everything in my body wants to do the opposite. I thought clearly the whole drive back to Pittsburgh. By the time we got home, I had a list. I knew that my father had told me, clearly and in front of Theo, that he intended to split his estate evenly. I knew the signature looked wrong. I knew that the document had been dated 11 days after he visited us, when he had seemed happy, settled, clear-minded, and I knew that the 2 people who had the most to gain from a rewrite were sitting in that conference room looking like they had already spent the money. I started with what I could verify. I called my father's primary care doctor who had treated him for 15 years. I asked about his cognitive state in the last 2 months of his life. I explained why I was asking. She could not share his chart, but she told me, carefully, within the limits of what she was allowed to say, that she had seen nothing to suggest any impairment or confusion at his last visit in mid-October. She said he had been, in her words, sharp as ever. 11 days before supposedly rewriting his estate. Then I called the county probate court and requested the formal submission records. I found out that the amendments had been filed not by my father's regular attorney but by a different firm, a 2-person operation on the east side of Akron that I had never heard of. Then I did something I did not tell anyone I was doing. I went back through my father's phone. When he died, Marcus had taken possession of the house, but my father had used a cloud backup service for his phone, and I was still listed as an emergency contact on his account. It took me 3 attempts and a call to customer support, but I got in. The text thread between my father and Marcus over the last 6 weeks of his life told me everything. There were gaps, stretches of days where my father did not respond. Messages from Marcus asking him to just think about it and, "You know this is the right thing for the family." And, "Brooke and I have 3 kids. Claire only has 1 on the way." It's basic math. There was a message from Marcus asking my father to meet someone at an office downtown on October 13th, one day before the amendment was dated. There was a message my father sent the night of October 13th, 2 minutes after midnight. It was sent to Marcus and it said, "I don't feel right about this. I need to talk to Tom Parrish before anything is final." There was no response from Marcus in the thread after that. I sat with my laptop open and the phone records in front of me and felt something move in my chest that was not sadness and not anger, but something that lived in between those two things. My father had doubts. He said he needed to talk to his real attorney before anything was final. And 3 weeks later, he had a stroke. And the version of his will that got filed was the one from the day after he expressed those doubts. I needed help. And I needed to be very careful about the kind of help I asked for. I called a probate and estate litigation attorney in Pittsburgh, a woman named Ms. Adler, who had been recommended to me by a colleague who had gone through something similar with her mother's estate 2 years earlier. I told her everything. I sent her the text screenshots, the signature comparison I had done side by side with old documents, the name of the firm that filed the amendment, and the phone call with my father's doctor. She was quiet for a long moment after I finished. Then she said, "This is actionable, but I need you to understand something. If we go after this, they will make it personal. They will come after your character, your fitness as a daughter, maybe even your fitness as a mother. You need to decide if you're ready for that." I looked at my stomach. My daughter kicked as if on cue. I told Ms. Adler I was ready. She told me not to reach out to Marcus or my aunt. Not yet. She told me not to let them know I was suspicious. She said, and this is the part I want you to really hear because it is something I use all the time now in other parts of my life. She said, "Let them feel safe. Safe people get careless." So I did not call Marcus. I did not confront my aunt. I sent a brief, bland message to the family group chat saying I was resting and taking care of myself and would reach out when I was feeling better. My aunt replied with a heart emoji. Marcus sent a thumbs up. They thought I was grieving quietly in Pittsburgh. They had no idea I was building a case. Ms. Adler filed a formal will contest with the probate court 4 weeks after the reading. The grounds were undue influence, fraud, and potential forgery. The moment Marcus was served, my phone started ringing. He called 3 times before I picked up. "What are you doing?" His voice had that tone, the one older siblings use when they are trying to sound reasonable but the effort is showing. "This is Dad's wishes. You dragging his name through the courts." "Then it should be easy to prove," I said. "Brooke is devastated. The kids are asking questions. You are tearing this family apart over money." "I'm asking a court to verify a signature," I said. "If the signature is real, I lose and I go home. That's how it works." He hung up. My aunt called an hour later. This is when she said it, the thing she said at the beginning of this story. That I owed the family. That Marcus needed this more than I did. That she would make sure I never saw those grandchildren. Her way of saying she would poison whatever relationship I had left with Marcus's kids. I let her talk. I did not argue. I did not cry or threaten or explain myself. I said, "I hear you and I understand you feel that way. And let's let the court process handle it." Every sentence I gave her was a gray wall she could not climb. She had nothing to grab onto. By the end of the call, she was practically vibrating with frustration because she could not locate the part of me she expected to wound. What she did not know was that I had put the call on speaker. Theo was in the doorway writing down everything she said in a notebook. Ms. Adler requested the original amendment document for forensic handwriting analysis. The court granted it. The analyst, a certified document examiner with 30 years of experience, submitted her report 6 weeks later. The signature was inconsistent with my father's authenticated samples in 14 distinct ways. The ink pressure pattern, the pen angle, the letter spacing in his middle name. Her professional opinion was that the signature was not produced by the same hand as the verified samples. The 2 witnesses on the document were employees of the filing firm. When deposed separately, they gave slightly different accounts of the signing. One said my father arrived alone. The other said he arrived with someone else. Neither could describe what he was wearing. Neither remembered him saying anything. For a man who, by all accounts, was warm and talkative and sharp as ever. The fact that two supposed witnesses could not produce a single specific memory of him was its own kind of answer. The firm that had filed the amendment turned out to have a connection to Marcus that Miss Adler uncovered through business registration records. One of the two partners had done incorporation work for a small LLC Marcus had formed 2 years earlier. When Marcus was deposed, he denied knowing the firm personally. He said he had recommended them to his father based on a referral. He said he did not know who had suggested them. Then Ms. Adler showed him the text message, the one where he had asked my father to meet someone at a downtown office on October 13th. He said he did not recall sending that message. She showed him the business registration filing that listed his name alongside the firm partner's name on the LLC documentation. He said that was a coincidence. He said this while sweating through his collar in a way that the court reporter could not transcribe, but that his own attorney seemed very unhappy about. 3 weeks before the case was set for a full hearing, Marcus's attorney made contact with Ms. Adler. There was a settlement offer. Marcus was willing to revert to an equal split of all assets in exchange for dropping the fraud and forgery claims. I want to tell you I felt triumphant. I want to tell you I felt like winning. What I felt was tired. I felt tired in the specific way you feel. Tired after you have spent 8 months doing something that should never have been necessary. I felt tired in the way of someone who has carried a weight so long they have forgotten what it feels like to put it down. I took the settlement. The house was sold and split 50-50. The savings account, the rental property, the insurance proceeds, divided equally as my father had always intended. As he had told me over dinner in Pittsburgh, 3 days into October, while he beamed at my belly and talked about teaching his grandchild to fish the way his own father had taught him. My aunt did not speak to me for 4 months. Then she called on my daughter's birthday, a Tuesday in late June, and she was different on the phone. Quieter. She asked how the baby was doing. I think she called because she missed my father too, and I was one of the last connections she had to him, and whatever version of events she had told herself was starting to feel lonely. I did not give her a tearful reconciliation. But I did not hang up either. I told her the baby was beautiful. I said she looked like my dad around the eyes. There was a long pause, and then my aunt made a sound that was not quite a sob, and I let it sit there. Marcus and I have not spoken. Not really. He showed up at my daughter's first birthday party because Theo's mother invited the whole extended family without telling us, and he stood by the snack table the entire time holding a paper plate and not making eye contact with anyone. Brooke did not come. He left before the cake. I do not know what his marriage looks like now. I do not know what he tells himself about what he did or tried to do. I do not spend very much time thinking about it. What I think about, more than anything, is the text my father sent at 2 in the morning on October 13th. I don't feel right about this. I need to talk to Tom Parrish before anything is final. He never got to make that call, but I made it for him. My daughter is 7 months old. She has his eyes, the same quiet, steady brown. She does not know yet about the rainy day fund or what it cost to protect it, but someday I will tell her. I will tell her that her grandfather built something with his hands and his patience and 34 years of showing up, and that when someone tried to take it, I showed up too. The money is in an account with her name on it. I have not touched it. She will know it is there when she meets it. If you have ever had to fight for what someone you loved left behind, type the word "still" in the comments. I want to see how many of us are out there. I used to think that doing the right thing was its own kind of protection. That if I stayed quiet and kept my head down and did not make demands, the people who were supposed to love me would simply treat me fairly. I believed that for a long time. Longer than I should have. What this whole experience taught me, and I mean really drove into my bones, is that fairness is not something that happens to you. It is something you have to choose to go after, even when every instinct tells you to sit down, keep the peace, and let it go. My aunt told me I was tearing the family apart. Marcus looked at me across that probate office like I was the one being unreasonable. And for a few days, honestly, I almost believed them. That is what people in their position count on. They count on you doubting yourself more than you doubt them. But here is what I kept coming back to. My father sent a text at 2 in the morning saying something felt wrong. He was a man who spent 34 years getting up before sunrise to go do hard, honest work. He did not send messages like that lightly. He knew something was off. He just did not get the chance to act on it. And when I understood that, I stopped feeling like I was fighting for myself. I started feeling like I was finishing something he had started. That shift matters. Because when you are fighting purely for yourself, the cost starts to feel like it might not be worth it. The legal fees, the sleepless nights, the family dinners that will never happen again. All of it piles up and you start calculating. But when you are fighting to make something right that someone you loved could not fix themselves, the math changes. The question stops being, is this worth it to me, and becomes, what kind of person do I want to be when this is over? I want my daughter to know that her mother looked at a hard thing and did not look away. I want her to understand, when she is old enough, that intelligence without courage is just cleverness. That you can be smart enough to see exactly what is happening and still choose to do nothing. And that choosing nothing is still a choice with consequences. What I did was not extraordinary. I made phone calls. I read documents. I hired someone who knew more than me and listened to her. None of that required anything superhuman. It just required not stopping. Marcus made a different choice, and I think about what it cost him. Not what the court ordered him to pay back, but what it cost him in the quieter way. He stood at his niece's first birthday party by the snack table, alone, holding a paper plate, unable to look at anyone. That is not a punishment anyone handed him. That is just what happens when you build your life on something crooked. Eventually, you were the only one willing to stand near it. I am not angry at him anymore. Anger takes up space I would rather give to something else. But I am clear-eyed about what happened, and I think being clear-eyed is its own kind of justice. You see people for who they actually are, not who you needed them to be. And then you stop arranging your life around protecting them from that truth. My father built something real. I made sure it landed where he intended. That is enough for me.